Hey, welcome back to the Philadelphia Assemblies, or welcome if it's your first time. Today is the 6th day of the 10th month of the year 5784 as we keep the calendar. And again, if this is your first time being on here, you might think, well, you guys are about 2 weeks outside the box, or could be a whole lot of different ways with all the different ways the calendar is kept. But we keep the full moon as the new moon per Psalm 81 verse 3, plus a lot of other things. And if you want to know why we keep the calendar that way, watch Signs in the Heavens. It's I share it every day on my Facebook page at Bob Farr, and it's on the Philadelphia Assemblies here on YouTube. So if you just want to look it up and watch that video, you'll understand. It's also the 21st day of December of the year 2024 on the Gregorian calendar, and it's the 7th day Sabbath by the weekly cycle, okay? A lot of people keep a lunar cycle. I say a lot. There's probably a lot more that don't, but there's a lot that do. Mm-hmm. And if you want to know why we keep the weekly cycle and not the monthly cycle, watch Lunar Sabbath again on Philadelphia Assemblies. And today's message is entitled Hanukkah and the People of YAHUAH. Okay? Hanukkah and the People of YAHUAH. So this is not to bash anybody, either way, or to lift people up that do certain things. That's not what this is about. This is just answering the question, and we're answering it for ourselves, okay? But a lot of people are out there asking questions all the time. Do you keep Hanukkah? Should we keep Hanukkah? Well, we don't, and here's why, okay? And that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to go back into the book of Maccabees where the tradition first began, okay? And we're going to look at some scriptures, and we're going to make our case for why we don't keep it. Again, that doesn't mean that somebody, is in sin because they're keeping it. We're not going to make that judgment call. That's between you and the Most High, okay? But we're going to go ahead and open in prayer like we always do. We're going to stand and face where the temple was, in the place where Father Yahuwah chose to place His name there. Almighty Father Yahuwah, again, we praise You in all things. Father, we thank You for the breath of life, Father, for the opportunity to come before You on this your Sabbath day. Father, we thank You for the understanding that You're continually pouring out on us, for all our day-by-day needs that You supply. Father, for our good health and for the energy that You've given us to do the work that You've called us to do. We praise You and ask that You continue to give us that so that we can move forward to teach the truth as You've given it to us. And again, Father, where we're in error, we ask for correction. And where we are in the truth, Father, we ask that You would give those ears to hear and understand so that they could have a closer relationship with You through Your precious Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, or Jesus the Christ. Okay? We ask, Father, that You would give peace that passes all understanding to those that have lost loved ones in the last week. Father, we ask that also You would heal all those that are sick out there. And again, as we get ready to dive into Your word and on this subject of Hanukkah, again, Father, give us the words to say and let them be Your words and not just ours. And again, we ask all these things in Your precious Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, or Jesus the Christ's name. Amen. Okay. All right. We're going to kick this thing off in Deuteronomy. We're just going to do some little one-liners for a minute because, and again, this is to establish a point, okay? And you'll see the point whenever you get there, brother. We're going to start in Deuteronomy chapter 4, and we're just going to read verse 2.
Okay. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahuwah your Elohim, which I command you.
Now, I take that real seriously, myself personally, is that, I don't want to add to nor take away. And that could be with His feasts, that could be with anything. because of what's stated here. Let's go now to Deuteronomy chapter 12. I'm just going to read 32.
Okay. Deuteronomy 12 and 32. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. You shall not add thereto nor diminish from it.
Okay? Just the same thing. Now, in my sword scripture, it gives me a reference to Revelation 22:18. Okay? Let's go there.
Actually 19.
19. Okay, this says 18. Maybe we should have read 2.
I guess it is 18. 18 and 19.
Okay.
I can start reading 18.
Yeah. 20.
Yeah, we'll go 18.
This is the very, very end of what we call the scriptures. Okay?
And by the way, there's another one in Proverbs we don't have
Yeah.
written down 30
Right.
that says it.
Says the same thing. Okay?
All right. Revelation 22, verse 18 and 19. For I testify unto every man that hears the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, God or Yahuwah shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God or Yahuwah shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of this holy city and from the things that are written in this book.
Now, a lot of people believe this is just talking about what's written in the book of Revelation. I don't believe that. I mean, it's too very similar to what we read back in Deuteronomy. And I take this very, very seriously because of verse 19. He says, I testify unto you, every man that hears the words of this prophecy. Now, I didn't provide the Strong's Concordance number, but you can easily look it up. The word prophecy here is equal to teaching, okay? It's not necessarily just talking about prophecy, because you have to look up the Greek word for understanding. It says, and again, he says, for I testify unto you of the prophecy or the teaching of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, Yahuwah will add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. Now, there's plagues written in this book, but there's also plagues written in Exodus and plagues all through the Old Testament. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this teaching, so take away anything from it, Yahuwah shall take away his part out of the book of life, which is called the Lamb's book of life here in the book of Revelation, and out of the holy or set apart city, and from the things which are written in this book. Now, today it's all compiled into one book. Originally it wasn't. Okay, this would have been a separate teaching that didn't come along till John, or Yochanan, was on the Isle of Patmos. He had a vision, and he wrote this entire book. Okay, so, but it is now compiled together. And I think it's a warning for us adding or taking away from the words of the Most High that are even given through his Son, our Messiah. So let's go now to Matthew 4 to look for something from the Messiah here. Matthew chapter 4, and we're just going to read verse 4.
Okay? But he, Messiah, answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Most High. Elohim.
Of Elohim in this case. This would be theoe in Greek, which is equal to Elohim. It's a plural noun. Okay? This was actually a quote from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3. Okay? And again, it says, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of Elohim. Now, do you think we should live by every word that comes from the mouth of Judas Maccabus? Or every word that comes from the mouth of anybody? You know, me or anybody else. We got to live by every word that comes forth from the mouth of Elohim, which is talking about the Most High and his inner being, the Holy Spirit. Okay, let's go now to Leviticus chapter 23, and we're just going to read these things that are commanded by Yahuwah in Leviticus chapter 23. Gotta go to the right, get there. I always start thinking instead of going, and then it takes me a little longer to get there because I'm thinking. Okay, whenever you get ready, brother, we're going to start in verse 1, and I'm going to lightly expositorily teach this, not heavy for time's sake.
Okay, and Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of Elohim, or Yahuwah, which ye shall proclaim to be holy or set apart assemblies, even these are my feasts.
Very important to notice whose feast they are. They're not the feast of the Jews. They're not the feast of anyone. They're the feast of Yahuwah, or the feast of Elohim. Okay? Go ahead, brother.
Verse 3.
Now notice this first verse here. This is talking about today, the seventh-day Sabbath, included in these feasts. Okay? There's a difference when we get into verse 4, and we need to pay attention. That's where some people don't get confused and think we're supposed to be doing a monthly cycle on the Sabbath instead of a weekly cycle that started at creation and continues even into this day. Go ahead, brother.
Verse 3, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest and holy assembly. You shall do no work therein. It is a Sabbath of Elohim Yahuwah in all your dwellings.
So this is a feast day. It's a day of rest that was established in Genesis, carried forth in the Ten Commandments, but all through Scripture, okay? That this was a feast day to Yahuwah, and that just means festive or celebratory, okay? In Isaiah 58, it talks about making the Sabbath a delight. It's specifically talking about the Day of Atonement there, but I think that also fits all his feast days. Go ahead, brother.
Verse 4, these are the feast of Elohim, Yahuwah, even holy convocations or assemblies, which you shall proclaim in their season.
Now let's break this down. This is important. These are the feast, and this word feast here is actually Hebrew Strong's Concordance number 4150. And it's Mohadim, and it means appointed times, okay? And it talked about it in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, these appointed times. That's when we're all talking about things that are set in their seasons.
And which is still 4150.
Yep, and the 7-day Sabbath is not included in those that are set in their seasons, okay? So that's because it started on the day of creation, in our opinion, okay? And it continues until forever, okay? So these are the feast, or the Mohadim, the appointed times of Yahuwah, even set apart assemblies, which you shall proclaim in their seasons, or Mohadim. Okay, go ahead, brother.
Verse 5, in the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahuwah's Passover.
Now, notice here when it says, now there's a lot of people now that are going back and forth whether we celebrate the Sabbath from evening to evening or morning to morning. Now, we're going to make point when we get up to the Day of Atonement, but notice what it says here. In the 14th day of the first month at even, and it could have said begins Yahuwah's Passover. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 6, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Mighty One. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread.
Go ahead.
The first day you shall have a holy assembly. You shall do no servile work therein.
Or regular work. And all that means is you can do anything that you do to prepare for the feast. Preparing food, you can do it right on that day. You don't need a preparation day like we do on the Sabbath to prep things. Okay? So he says here, in the first, he said in 6, he said on the 15th day of that same month, the 14th day being the Passover, and our Messiah being slain on the 14th day, okay? And he had to be off of the stake or the cross before the sun went down and to begin the first day of unleavened bread, or it would have desecrated the Sabbath, okay? And it desecrates anyone because it says, cursed is any man that's hung on a tree. Again, Deuteronomy is where that comes from. And he says, so there's 15th day of the same month is the feast. So these are prophetic, these feasts. See, they're pointing they're a shadow of what's already been, and they're pointing to what has yet to be fulfilled. And then he says, in the first day you shall have a set apart assembly, and you shall do no regular work. Go ahead.
But you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Mighty One 7 days, and the seventh day is the holy convocation or assembly. You shall do no servile work there.
Now, we know that if we go to the book of Ephesians, it tells you there that there's some things that are done away. Hebrews brings that up too. And what's done away with is this right here for 100% sure. We're not going to be offering an offering made by fire on this day or any day, because our Messiah was our offering. All these things, again, were pointing to the Messiah shedding his blood to cover our past sins. Not to give us a license to continue in sin, but to cover our past sins, give us a clean slate, and then we were to put on that Messiah and become like him through the Spirit, the empowerment of the Spirit. So go ahead, brother.
Verse 9, and Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you be come into the land which I gave unto you, and you shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest.
Now, we need this specific point was made right here. It said, speak unto actually it should have been the Ben or the sons of Israel, if you go to the Hebrew. The King James, more modern ones especially, have kind of taken gender out of it. And that doesn't mean women are lesser, but the men were to teach their wives, and the men were the ones that were commanded to come up to Israel 3 times a year, up to Jerusalem 3 times a year to keep the feast. So that's why it should have been written, speak unto the Ben or the sons of Israel, and say unto them, when you come into the land which I will give you, this is during the Exodus, and will reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a handful, a sheaf means handful, look it up, of the first fruits. That would have been talking about the barley harvest, because barley comes right before wheat. And on the day of first fruits, this is what we're talking about here. It's called the wave sheaf here in the King James, but it's talking about the day of first fruits. Okay? So he says, prior to this, I want to make this clear, in Exodus, they ate the Passover in their own homes. Okay? They're not going to do that. We're going to read that in Deuteronomy 16. But here it's saying when you come into the land. So the whole time, the years that they were out in the wilderness coming up, they weren't keeping this feast or any of the feasts. That's why it says, he says, when you come into the land which I give unto you, you shall reap the harvest of the people that were there before them. Then you shall bring a handful of that feast, of that barley, of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. Now you got to understand, our Messiah is the first fruit. Okay? And that's what the day of first fruits is all about. It's the day that the Messiah was offered up, and we could see that in the New Testament when Messiah ascended to the Father on that, what's written in the King James English, the first day of the week, when actually in Greek it's the first of the Sabbaths. Okay? Right. And they're talking specifically here about the day of first fruits as we're reading here. See the propheticness of these feasts? Go ahead, brother.
Verse 11, and he shall wave the sheaf before Elohim Yahuwah, to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave.
And when the Messiah rose on the day of first fruits, okay, and he presented himself to the Most High with his own blood. That's what this is talking about. He said, and he, the priest, will wave the sheaf, the handful, before Yahuwah to be accepted for you in your stead. Okay? On the morrow, after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. See, that's why they translate it first day of the week, because it was the day after the Sabbath. Okay? But they were talking specifically about this day of first fruits. Go ahead, brother.
Well, and you shall offer that day, when you wave the sheaf, and he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto the Mighty One.
Unto Yahuwah, again, is what is in Hebrew. Now, in the Greek New Testament, it's the Mighty One, okay? In Greek Old Testament. So, but he says, and you shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf, a lamb without blemish. What do you think that lamb represents? Our Messiah. He's the only one that's without sin, and that's why he could qualify to be that perfect Lamb of Elohim. of the first year for a burnt offering unto Yahuwah. See, we don't need to do that anymore because he's been accepted on that day of first fruits for our past sins, and now we are putting him on. Go ahead, brother.
13, and the meat or the grain offering.
Yes, the grain offering.
And the grain offering thereof shall be a 2/10 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto the mighty one for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the fourth part of a hin.
And this simply brought down is talking about, when Messiah said, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Every one of these grain offerings, they made unleavened cakes, barley cakes, first fruit cakes. Okay? And it was always offered, and this is what we're seeing here. And the grain offering thereof shall be 2/10 of fine flour mixed with oil, and offering made by fire unto Yahuwah, this barley cake, and drink offering, which is this wine offering. He said, take, drink, this is my blood, this is the blood of the new covenant. See, this is so prophetic, and that's why we keep the feast. We learn from them every year that we keep them. They're planning towards even past Messiah. Go ahead, brother.
14, and ye shall eat neither bread nor parched corn, neither green ears, until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your mighty one Elohim. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings.
So they didn't eat of the new harvest until they had given that first fruits offering. And this is all talking about the first resurrection. It is so deep, folks. It's what we're talking in these feasts. He says, and you shall eat neither bread nor parched grain, or that would be dried grain, nor green ears until the same day that you have brought an offering unto Elohim. It shall be a statute or a regulation forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. Go ahead.
15, and you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new grain offering unto the mighty one Yahuwah.
Now when we get to Deuteronomy 16, we're going to see that this is called the Feast of Weeks. They don't call it by name here. They call it in Deuteronomy, beginning on the wave sheaf, numbering to the day of Pentecost, or Shavuot in Hebrew. Okay? So, and you shall count from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf, that handful, that wave offering, that represents our Messiah, of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. And that's 49 days. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days. Okay? 49, 50. Those 7 Sabbaths cover 49 days. That 50th day is pointing towards the Jubilee and also Pentecost. This is huge prophetic meaning behind this. And most of the time we just read scripture, but if we haven't read the whole entire Tanakh or the Old Testament, we don't get the propheticness of those statements. Go ahead, brother, verse 17.
You shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2/10 deals, that shall be a fine flour. They shall be baken with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the mighty one Yahuwah.
Now, remember back here, these back here were baked with unleavened. Okay, right. Those cakes, that barley cake, that first one, because Messiah, a lot of times, not always, leaven represents sin in Hebrew idiom. Okay, so the first one, our Messiah, was without sin. Verse 17 says, you shall take out of your homes 2 wave loaves. You're supposed to make them of 2/10 deals, or 2 measures. They shall be made of finely sifted flour. They shall be baked with leaven, because they represent the first resurrection, because everyone except the Messiah has sinned and fell short of that. Okay? They are what? The first fruits of Yahuwah, and that's pointing towards that first resurrection. That's deep, guys. Go ahead.
18, and you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs without blemish of the first year, and 1 bullock, and 2 rams, They shall be for a burnt offering unto the mighty one Yahuwah, with their meat or grain offering, and their drink offerings, even an offering made by fire of sweet savor unto the mighty one.
So bread offering, drink offering, that's representing the Messiah. That's that unleavened sacrifice. And notice it says, and you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs. Why 7? 7's complete number. Okay?
Right.
And that's pointing to the completeness of that first resurrection. Okay? Without blemish of the first year, and 1 young bullock and 2 rams, and they shall be for burnt offerings unto Yahuwah, with the grain offerings and with the drink offerings, even an offering made by fire of sweet savor unto Yahuwah. Now, that's all prophetic, guys. They didn't have any idea what this was pointing toward at the time. We do now because we're standing on the other side of that prophecy. Go ahead, brother.
19, then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, and 2 lambs of the first year for a sacrifice of peace offering.
Wonder why a goat for a sin offering. See, he's separating the sheep from the goats all this time, all the way up until the first resurrection. Okay, go ahead.
20, and the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before Elohim Yahuwah. With the 2 lambs, they shall be holy unto Yahuwah for the priest.
So this whole deal is talking about the Messiah and the first resurrection. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. See, this is why we keep the feast. It's not because we're trying to be like the Jewish people. You know, we're trying to do what Yahuwah's commanded so that we can learn more from His word, because we are to live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Elohim. Go ahead, brother.
21, and you shall proclaim on the selfsame day that it may be an holy assembly unto you. You shall do no servile work therein. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generation.
And the culmination of the Feast of Weeks is the day of Pentecost. In English, okay, comes from the Greek word, okay, count 50 is what it means, okay, and then, or Shavuot in Hebrew, and the 10 Commandments were given on the day of Shavuot, or Pentecost.
Yes, sir.
That's so much you need to know in Scripture. Go ahead, brother.
22, and when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not make clean riddance of the corners of your field when you reapest. Neither shall you gather any gleaning of any harvest. You shall leave them unto the poor and to the stranger. I am Yahuwah your Elohim.
See, this accomplished 2 things. Okay? Number 1, it helped take care of the poor. Remember, they always were to remember the poor. The Torah talks very highly of the poor. But also, this is talking about the first and second resurrection. The first resurrection being what we just read, but then he says, and when you reap the harvest of your land, when you finish reaping, the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, you shall not make clean riddance of the corners. So the first resurrection isn't everything. Okay, there's going to be more gathered in a second. When you reap, neither shall you gather any of the gleanings that fall to the side, and you shall leave them for the poor and to the stranger. I am Yahuwah your Elohim. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. 23, and Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall you have a Sabbath, a memorial of the blowing of trumpets, and holy assembly.
So this is talking about right here, this is talking, speak unto the sons of Israel, saying in the 7th month, you're going to have, it's called the Feast of Trumpets in English, or the Day of Shouting, okay, if you go to a literal translation of that, okay. It's Yom Terim in Hebrew, or the blowing of trumpets, again, or the Day of Shouting, celebrating, because guess what? The king been in the field since the month before. He's on his way to the temple for the Day of Atonement. This is prophetic, guys. The Father's going to return on the day he's going to come before those that are spirit on the Day of Atonement. And this is all celebratory, pointing towards that. He says, I'm going to make sure I read that. Speaking to the children of Israel, saying in the 7th month, okay, in the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath, of a memorial of a memory of to remember of the blowing of trumpets is a set apart assembly. Go ahead.
25, you should do no servile work therein, but you should offer an offering made by fire unto the mighty one YAHUAH.
He called it a Sabbath, and he also said that you do no regular work. So again, it's a feast day. You can prepare food. Go ahead.
And YAHUAH spake unto Moses, saying, also on the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy assembly unto you. You shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire unto the mighty one YAHUAH. And you shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before YAHUAH your Elohim.
Now, I'm not going to go into all this. There's a ton more, and I'll be going into it different times during the feast, teaching more on this. But the Day of Atonement is called Yom Kippur, okay, on that, and that means atonement, okay? And what that's talking about there is this day that what they would one time a year, they would come up and they would bring a sin offering, a special one, for their sins for the whole year, okay? And when they did that, they had the time period before the Day of Trumpets that I just spoke of, when it was called the Days of Awe, where they had to go back, if they had sinned against their brother, and they had aught against someone, they needed to go back and make that right before their Messiah spoke of that. He said, if you sinned against your brother, leave your offering here and go back and make it right with your brother and then come offer your offering. Okay, on that one day a year, that's what this is speaking about here. And they should afflict their souls. And afflict here means, let's see, what do I got here? It is Strong's Concordance number 6031, and it means to humble yourself before YAHUAH. Now, do you think that might humble you a little bit if you went back every year to everybody you think you might have offended? Sometimes you don't know, so you can't do that, but to do that, so you humble yourselves and offer an offering made by fire unto YAHUAH. Go ahead. 29,
for whatsoever soul it shall be that shall not be afflicted in that same day,
or humbled, 6031.
He shall be cut off from among his people.
Yep. Now, cut off from his people back then, that meant to run them off from the whole congregation. But ultimately, they're going to get cut off from on the day of the great white throne judgment. When Gehenna fire starts, they're going to get cut off from among their people. All picturesque, and all this stuff is prophetic. Go ahead.
And whatsoever soul it be,
or individual,
whatsoever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, that same soul shall be destroyed from among his people.
Notice that day you can't do any work, none whatsoever.
Verse 31 says that. You shall do no manner of work.
That's right.
It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings.
Now, if we're grafted into Israel and not the other way around, then what part of this do we not understand? He said, this shall be a statute forever throughout all your generations. Go ahead, brother.
Verse 32, It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and you shall afflict your souls, and the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening unto evening shall you celebrate your Sabbath.
Now, notice here it says from evening to evening. Now, they didn't say that on all the rest of them, but, you know, it's like in the New Testament. You know, when they started, everybody kept the Sabbath. There's not a lot written in there about the Sabbath. Why is that? Because everybody was keeping the Sabbath. Tertullian, the historian, said the whole world was keeping the Sabbath, not just Hebrews or Israelites, everybody. And that's the same reason why they don't talk too much about this here. Why would they say they keep this one from evening to evening and all the rest of them from morning to morning?
Right.
It ain't going to work out mathematically. Go and that's important. Go ahead, brother.
33, And YAHUAH spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles, for 7 days unto the mighty one YAHUAH. On the first day shall be a holy convocation or assembly. You shall do no servile work therein.
Now let's think about this real quick and not spend a lot of time on it, but this is talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, okay? or Shavuot in Hebrew.
Or Sukkot.
Not Sukkot. I'm sorry. Thank you, brother, because I was stuck on that from the last.
That's why I'm here.
Yep, yes, sir. That's why we're both here. Keep each other straight. Okay. So this is the day here of Sukkot, the Feast of Sukkot. Notice it's 7 days. Okay. But even though the Feast of Sukkot or Tabernacles is 7 days, there's another day on it. It's 8 days. Go ahead, brother.
7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the mighty one Yahuwah. On the 8th day shall be an holy convocation unto you. You shall offer an offering made by fire unto the mighty one Yahuwah. It is a solemn assembly, and you shall do no servile work therein. Now,
think about it. This is important in the context. This is the only feast that has 8 days total. 7 days they slept in tabernacles. The 8th day was a holy convocation or a Sabbath day. Okay? And that's so important. And the day of the Feast of Sukkot or Tabernacles represents a new heaven and new earth. 7 days they'll be in temporary dwellings because the earth and the heavens will burn up in a fervent heat. Okay? And then on the 8th day, there'll be the new heaven and new earth. How many days did it take to create the earth the first time, to everything in it? 7 days. 6 days, and 7th day he rested. Okay? Same thing. Okay? The first day is a Sabbath of rest. Then there's 6 days, and then the new heaven and new earth. That's deep. There's a whole lot in that. And that's the only feast that starts with a Sabbath and ends with one that there's 8 days in it on the commanded feast of Yahuwah. And that's what that's the important, thus saith Yahuwah, or what's commanded. Go ahead, brother.
37, these are the feasts of Yahuwah, which you shall proclaim to be set apart or holy assemblies. You shall offer an offering made by fire unto the mighty one Yahuwah, a burnt offering and a meat offering, a sacrifice, a drink offerings, and everything upon this day.
Now, what did he just said? These are the feasts of Yahuwah.
Right.
He's done. He doesn't have any more to add. And I don't care how much you read the scriptures, you're not going to find anything where he added any other days other than the Sabbath and the feast days. Okay, go ahead, brother.
Beside verse 30, beside the Sabbaths of Yahuwah, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your free will offerings, which you shall give unto the mighty one Yahuwah. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the mighty one Yahuwah. 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath.
Now notice that he says on the 15th day you have done gathering in all of your harvest, and you're supposed to be ready to give an offering from that. And that's talking about the Feast of Sukkot, and that's talking about that's that second resurrection. The whole harvest is in. That's prophetically pointing towards that. Shall be a Sabbath, and the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. Because that's representing a new heaven, new earth. Go ahead, brother.
40, and you shall take you on the first day boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before Yahuwah your Elohim 7 days.
And this is a temporary dwelling. That's a tabernacle or a sukkah in Hebrew. Okay? And he's telling you how to build a sukkah. And this is, and we saw the children of Israel lived in tents or temporary dwellings while they were in there, and everyone's going to live in those temporary setting between the time that the fire rains down out of heaven and destroys the heavens and the earth, and the time that there's a new one. And this is all prophetic speaking about this. Go ahead, brother.
41, and you shall keep it a feast unto the Yahuwah 7 days in a year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You should dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelite born shall dwell in booths.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, see, it's just for those that are born in Israel. No. When you are born again, okay, or you receive the Holy Spirit and you start your spiritual walk, you become an Israelite. And if you can read Ephesians chapter 2 and come up with it any other way, I need to get you to explain it to me. Go ahead, brother.
43, that your generations may know that I made the sons of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahuwah your Elohim. And Moses declared unto the sons of Israel the feast of Elohim
Now,
Yahuwah.
every one of the feasts that was commanded by Yahuwah, the celebrations, are written in the book of Leviticus. We're going to get a little bit more on them in Deuteronomy chapter 16 before we get into Hanukkah. Because, see, it's so important to know what thus saith Yahuwah before you start, seeing what thus saith Judas Maccabus.
Right.
Or Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Because he's in this fish too, in this fry too. Okay.
You ready? Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1.
I don't know why. Yep, I'm ready.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the mighty one, Yahuwah your Elohim. For in the month of Abib, Yahuwah your Elohim brought you forth out of Egypt by night.
And by the time the children of Israel get into Babylonian captivity, from there on, the only month that was given a name was the month of Abib. And that was pointed out in Exodus. Says this will be the beginning of months to you. Okay, and so he's telling you, and later on they come up with all these different. Nisan was the name for Abib. They changed that. That comes from Babylonian. Okay, and then we even had Tammuz as one of the months in the Hebrew calendar. So that why you think that is? If they were in captivity in Babylon, they ended up taking a lot of the traditions with them. But this is the only month that's named. And the rest of them are the second month, the third month, just like on the day of 7 days of the week. Originally, there wasn't no Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. There was only the first day of the week, the second day of the week, all the way up till you get to and you could stretch it a little on the sixth day and say that's the preparation day, but it's still the sixth day of the week. And then Friday or Sabbath was on Saturday, or the seventh day of the week. And it's called the Sabbath. None of that's changed. Go ahead, brother.
Verse 2, you shall therefore sacrifice the Passover unto Yahuwah your Elohim, for of the flock and of the herd, in the place which Yahuwah shall choose to place his name there.
Now, we read all that back in Exodus. We also read, it's in Exodus chapter 10 in more detail, but we read it in Leviticus 32. Now we're getting some more added information. He says, you shall therefore sacrifice the Passover unto Yahuwah. And we know it's talking about our Messiah, our Elohim, of the flock and of the herd, in the place which Yahuwah shall place his name there. Because they weren't doing it while they were in this wilderness. Go ahead.
Verse 3, you shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread therein, even the bread of affliction. For you came forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that you may remember the day when you came forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life.
What do you think, keep not eating leavened bread during the days of unleavened bread? It's just to remind us. It's a physical reminder of getting sin out of our life. I've been keeping the days of unleavened bread for over 20 years. And most of the time, I would get the leaven out because the book says so. And then about halfway through, I'll find something in my that I didn't get, and I didn't throw it out. Now, I'm not damned for that, but that's teaching me that there's always sin still in my life, and I need to keep digging every year to get rid of that sin, because the only one that was without sin was our Messiah, and that's why he was the Lamb, and that's why we're the rest of the first fruits, as we read back in Leviticus, or with the 2 loaves of bread represents that. Go ahead.
Verse 4, and there shall be no leavened bread seen with you in all your coast 7 days, neither shall there be anything of the flesh, which you sacrifice the first day at evening, remain all night until morning.
So he's talking about that Passover lamb, okay? They were to eat it. You got to read Exodus 10. We're not going to read all that today. They had to eat it with the entrails still in it and cook it, and whatever they didn't eat, they had to burn with fire because it wasn't supposed to be left. Now, why? That represents the Messiah again, not being in the tomb on the first day of unleavened bread. Go ahead.
Verse 5, you may not sacrifice you may not sacrifice the Passover within of your gates, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives.
Now remember back in Exodus, they did just that. They sacrificed that, and they brought it and they eat it in their own houses. But he says when you get to the place where Yahuwah placed his name there, that you don't do that. You've got to go to Jerusalem to do it at this time, okay? And we don't eat a Seder today, and that's why, okay? Because our Messiah is our Passover, as Paul told us clearly. Our Messiah is our Passover. Go ahead.
Verse 6, but at the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose to place his name in, there you shall sacrifice the Passover at evening, at the going down of the sun, at the season that you came forth out of Egypt.
See, here's another example of why we don't do morning to morning, okay? He says, when are you supposed to offer the sacrifice? I mean, you're supposed to do it at an evening, at the going down of the sun. We'll take the, what a lot of people call communion, we call the Passover. We take the bread and the wine on this day every year as just after the sun goes down. Representing the Messiah and all these things we're reading in the feasts, okay? So evening is the end of the day, and so that's why he was sacrificed at the end of the day, and he had to be off of the stake or this cross in the tomb before sundown on the first day of unleavened bread. Go ahead. 7,
and you shall roast and eat it in a place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose. And you shall turn in the morning and go into your tents.
Okay, that's because they had to go up to Jerusalem to keep it. Now, a lot of people say we don't keep the feast because we don't have the temple and we can't go up to Jerusalem. But our Messiah said, wherever 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I'll be in the midst of them. Paul in 1 Corinthians, we're not going to go there today, kept the feast where he was in hopes that he could be back in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. So that kind of blows a hole in that. Go ahead, brother.
Verse 8, 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly unto Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall do no work therein. 7 weeks shall you number unto you. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as you begin to put the sickle to the grain.
Now, I mean, doesn't this sound exactly like what we read in Leviticus chapter 23? 7 weeks shall you number, because there's 7 Sabbaths between the day of first fruits, and then he tells you there, from such a time as you began to put the sickle to the grain. That was that first fruit harvest, that barley harvest. Go ahead.
Verse 10, and you shall keep the feast of weeks unto Yahuwah your Elohim, with a tribute of a free will offering of your hand, which you shall give unto Yahuwah your Elohim, according to as Yahuwah your Elohim has blessed you.
So that's a tithe, okay? Because you're supposed to give that handful of your first fruits and then your free will offering on the day of Shavuot or Pentecost, and this all represents the first resurrection. Okay? And this is played out over and over and over again. You know, how do we learn? How do I teach a dog? Repetition. Okay? Why do you think Yahuwah trains us the way that he does? Okay, brother, where are we going?
No, we got to keep reading.
Keep reading.
I think you got down to 16.
Okay.
Verse 11, you shall rejoice before you Elohim, Yahuwah Elohim, your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter, and your manservant, and the maidservant, and the Levite that is within your gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow that are among you, in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim have chosen.
Who goes up to the feast? Not just the sons, do they? He just told you right there, he's saying, you shall rejoice before Yahuwah your Elohim, and you and your son and your daughter and your manservant, whether they're an Israelite or not, okay, and your maidservant and the Levite, the priest, and that is within your gates, and the stranger. That's somebody that's not joined theirself to Israel, because if they were Israel, just like the commonwealth of Israel in Ephesians chapter 2, and the fatherless and the widow that are among you in the place which Yahuwah has chosen to place his name there, which is Jerusalem. Go ahead.
Verse 12, and you shall remember that you was a bondman in Egypt, and you shall observe and do these statutes.
So All of us have been slaves at one point or another, you know. We're walking in the wilderness right now. We're not yet back to the promised land. Go ahead.
13, you shall observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days. After that you has gathered your grain and your wine.
Second resurrection. Go ahead.
And you shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son, and your daughter, and your manservant, your maidservant, and the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that are within your gates. Verse 15, 7 days shall you keep a solemn feast unto Yahuwah your Elohim, in the place which Yahuwah shall choose, because Yahuwah your Elohim shall bless you in all your increase, and in all the works of your hands. Therefore you shall surely rejoice. 3 times in a year shall your all males appear before Yahuwah thy Elohim, in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles, that they shall not appear before Yahuwah empty.
So when are they going to appear in Jerusalem before Yahuwah? They're going to do it at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, the Feast of First Fruits always falls within the Feast of Unleavened Bread, never outside of it. Okay, so you're already there for First Fruits. And the end of the Feast of Weeks is represented in Pentecost, or the day of Shavuot. And so that's another time you go up to Jerusalem, and then you go up for the Feast of Tabernacles, or the 7th month. They'd start their journey on the first day when they blow the trumpet, and everybody would start back, and then they would be there and celebrate atonement and be ready for the day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. Okay.
Now we get to go to
First Maccabees.
First Maccabees.
Now I'm going to let you read, because I didn't bring my Septuagint. I should have. I don't know what I was thinking. No.
Oh, you can follow.
I can follow. I remember what you said anyway. I've read that a bunch of times. I also have this expositorily taught. All of the Maccabees, all of the Tanakh, all of the New Testament is on the YouTube channel. And I've went through this, and you want to watch it, listen to the entirety of this, because we don't like taking things out of context. But we can't read the whole book of the Maccabees in one setting. We just can't do it. We're going to be getting this done right on time, I hope. You got her, brother?
Not really, but anyways.
Where are we going?
First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 41.
Oh, we're in Bell. First Maccabees.
It's hard to read some of that stuff because it's so small.
Yeah, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse what?
41.
41, okay.
See,
I can read it. I can read it.
I think it's on
Here it
that
is
side.
right here.
Got it over
Yep,
there?
I got it. Go ahead.
Okay. Moreover, King, how you say that?
Antiochus.
Antiochus. Okay.
Antiochus Epiphanes. That's who this
Right.
is.
Wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. And by the way, this app I got is word for word out of the Brenton Septuagint.
Yep.
Verse 42, and everyone should leave his laws, so that all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king.
Okay, so let's break that down, because it's very important. Okay, he says, moreover, King Antiochus, and his last name's Epiphanes, surname, wrote to his whole kingdom, which included both Jews and heathen, or nations. That's what that means. Okay, he says, and to everyone should leave his laws. Well, they were all pagans except for Israel. So, in other words, the Israel is supposed to kick their Torah to the curb. And if you read this whole chapter, you'll find out that they died not to do that. A whole lot of them gave up their life willingly to keep the commandments or keep the Torah. So all the nations agreed according, and that included Israel, to the commandment of the king. Go ahead.
43, yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion.
Many, but not everyone.
And sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath.
Now, they've sacrificed unto idols on the days that the pagans kept their feasts. And the pagans celebrated the solstice. They celebrated the equinoxes. Now, the equinox and the solstice are not pagan, okay? That's the result of Yahuwah's creation. But these guys that worship the creation and not the creator. And that's the problem. In Yahuwah's calendar, his feasts are set by the equinoxes, okay? But you don't celebrate the equinox. You celebrate so many days after the equinox, okay? Go ahead, brother.
Verse 44, for the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice, and drink offerings in the temple.
In the temple, the Most High. Go ahead.
And that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts.
And they not only did that all at their own idols, they did that in the temple. Okay? They went in the temple, and on the solstice, they sacrificed a pig on the altar. Go ahead, brother.
48, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanity.
Yep.
Verse 49, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances.
Why? The purpose is that they would forget the Torah and all the ordinances and cause them to sin. Go ahead.
50, and whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. In the selfsame manner wrote he to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city.
Instead of going to the temple and doing it what they're supposed to do, they city by city. Go ahead.
That, verse 52, that many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit every one that forsook the Torah, that they should commit evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into the secret places, even theresoever they could flee for succor. And verse 54, now the 15th day of the month of Keslu, and 140 and 50th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah and on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets.
Now think about what they're saying here. This is the 15th day of the 9th month on the Hebrew calendar. Okay, this is the dating because this is Israelites that wrote this, but this was coming up on the winter solstice. Okay, and so they come into the town, the Jerusalem, into Judah, and they built all these altars and different things, and they set the scene, and they're getting ready to offer this pig or this swine on the altar in the temple. And that's why Judas Maccabus, when he takes over the temple again, he rakes, he cleans all this out. We'll read it. Let's go ahead, brother. I'm going to take too long.
You explained that this is the period between Malachi and before.
I did not. Thank you. This is the 400 years, part of it, okay, not all of it, between Malachi and Matthew, okay? This time period, the nation of Judah, along with the nation of the lost tribes of Israel, were cut off from the Most High. What I mean by that, they didn't have a prophet.
They didn't have a king under Israel.
Josiah was the last king, and Josiah was Zedekiah, but Josiah after him. Okay, he burnt up, but it was too late. They were already cut off. You have to go back and read that story. But during this time period, this is when all this happened. There was no feast of dedication other than those that were dedicated in times before until this. And this time period, Judas Maccabus was a valiant man, very driven by the Torah and to do what was right. But Yahuwah didn't send him to do this, okay? He allowed it to happen as he did everything else. You have to realize what's going on. Go ahead, brother.
56, and when they had rent in pieces the books of the Torah,
tore them up,
which they found, they burnt them with fire. And whoever was found with any book of the Testament, or if any committed to the Torah, The king's commandment was that they should be put him to death.
Notice they translated to testament here, and that the Hebrew word would have been covenant, because that's what we're talking about, the Torah and the covenant. Go ahead.
58. Thus did they by their authority unto the Israelites every month to as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice upon the idol altar which was upon the altar of Yahuwah.
See what they did? On the 25th day of the month of Chislev, and that's the winter solstice, okay? Because that's when the pagans had their ceremony, that they sacrificed this pig on the altar. Now, there's going to be a time period come in between this, and Judas Maccabeus is going to overtake and take back the temple, okay? After this is the desecration of the temple. That's why we reading it. Go ahead, brother.
60. At which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised.
Anybody that did anything that was commandment, they killed them. Okay, go ahead. And I think that history is going to repeat itself again. I really do. When we read Matthew 24, it says, brother will turn against brother, and they will kill us and do him, think they're doing Yahuwah service. Go ahead.
61, and they hanged the infants about their necks, and rifled their houses, and slew them that had circumcised them. Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Therefore, the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with the meats, that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died, and then there was a great wrath upon Israel.
The same word that they translated testament earlier, they transmit covenant here.
Okay, now we'll go to chapter
Now we're going to
4.
go to chapter 4. And the time period now after Antiochus Epiphanes, we could read to all this, but we don't got time. You know, now Judas Maccabeus, a valiant man, has raised an uprising against him and overthrown Antiochus Epiphanes. And now they're going to rededicate the altar. Okay, that's why we're going to read about that in the New Testament as well. Go ahead.
Chapter 4, verse 52.
I'm not there yet.
It'll take you a little bit there.
Yeah, just these pages is the only reason.
Yeah, it's small.
Okay, chapter 4 and verse what, brother?
52.
Okay, let's see if I got that right. Go ahead and start.
Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning.
So notice the date here again. Remember we saw them offer that idol, that pig on the altar, on top of Yahuwah's altar. Okay? And now on the 5th and 20th day, that's the only difference in the wording, of the 9th month, which is Chislev, which is called the month of Chislev. Go ahead. In the 140.
Okay, verse 53, and offered sacrifice according to the Torah upon the new altar of the burnt offerings which they had made.
Okay, so he did tear up the old altar that they did that on. So he thought he had done good, but it's on the same day. Go ahead.
Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citerns and harps and cymbals.
I've lost my spot. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was 54. 55. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God or Yahuwah of heaven, the mighty one of heaven, who had given them good success. 56. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice, deliverance, and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away.
Or the nations, what they did on the altar years back was now put to rest, as far as they were concerned. Okay, but it didn't matter because Yahuwah still wasn't having any prophets sent to them. So they didn't have any real authority other than no different than the nations had. Okay? because they had been cut off. Go ahead.
One more verse, 59. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month of Chislev with mirth and gladness.
Now, I'm going to point out a couple of things in that, okay? Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar. Who ordained this day? Judas Maccabus and his brothers. When he's talking about brethren here, this is speaking about actual brothers. You have to read the whole book, okay? So they ordained the day, okay? Yahuwah didn't ordain the day, did he? And everything we read, he said don't add to or take away anything that's written in the book.
Right.
I got a problem with that. And it being on the day that they offered on. Now, I will say this about the Hebrew calendar. It's different than the pagan calendar, okay, that the pagans kept. So the Hebrew calendar does not always, the 25th of Chislev, does not always fall on the solstice, but it does regularly, as it does this. It's very close this year, okay? On the calendar, they said it happened today. Actually, this is supposed to be the solstice today, okay? Now, whether that's the actual solstice here or not, you really have to do your homework, and I'm not going to waste a whole lot of my time looking up whether this is the actual solstice, because that means it'd be the shortest day of the year, because tomorrow the sun starts coming back. See, that's what this celebration, in my opinion, is. It reverts back to them keeping this day that the heathen or the nations were keeping. And even though they thought they were doing it to their God, they were still doing it. Yahuwah plainly said, don't worship me like the nations worship their mighty ones. Okay, let's go now to the New Testament. Right?
Yep, John chapter 10.
And then we got another place we're going to talk about an 8-day feast that was abomination. Go ahead, brother.
John chapter 10, starting verse 22.
And because here's where a lot of people in John 10, verse 22 say, see, look, Messiah was keeping the Feast of Dedication.
Right.
And let's just read this and be honest with the text. Right. John chapter 10, verse 22, when you're ready, brother.
And it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter.
Okay, so he was there, okay? But let's see where he was. Was he inside the temple? Now, you got to go do a little studying on the temple and what's going on. Actually, he's on the porch, just outside the temple, one of the gates. Go ahead, brother.
And Jesus, or Yahushua, walked in the temple in Solomon's porch.
So he walked in the temple in Solomon's porch, the entry there. Go ahead.
Then came the Jews round about him and said unto him, how long do you make us to doubt? If you be the Christ, just tell us plainly.
Now, do you think they knew he was the Messiah? Because the word Christ here means anointed one or the Messiah. They did. You know why? Because they knew the Torah and they knew the prophets.
Yeah.
He fulfilled everything before their eyes. He made the blind to see, blind man that was born blind. He made a deaf man that was born deaf. And he raised the dead. He did everything, and they all knew it. But they were questioning his authority because that was questioning their authority. Okay, go ahead, brother.
The Messiah answered them, I told you, and you believe not. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me.
So he's testifying of his Father again here. He says, the works that I do, they bear witness of me. And why? Because the prophets all told what he was going to do, and they knew it. Go ahead, brother.
But you believe not, because you are not of my sheep, as I said unto you.
So we're going to read a little more, but I'm going to ask the question here. Where are his sheep?
Where's the disciples?
At this time, his disciples were his sheep. Okay, they're the ones that were following him from one place to another.
They're always there with
Where are they? Go ahead, brother.
Okay, verse
27.
My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me.
He's talking about his disciples and the throngs of people that followed
That's
him
right.
everywhere. Go ahead, brother.
And I give them unto them eternal life, that they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father, which gave them me, is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one.
Now, he's saying I and my Father are one. You think he's saying I and my Father the same? I don't. I think he's saying we're one in spirit. Okay, because that Ruach HaKodesh, that Holy Spirit, which was the Father's inner being, was in him. And everything that the Father knew, he knew because of that Ruach. Go ahead.
Right. Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him.
Yep.
And Jesus, Yahushua, answered them, many good works have I showed you from the Father. For which of those works do you stone me?
So, again, where are his sheep?
That's it.
He came here, and these ones that were here keeping this feast of dedication, he told them, you are not my sheep. And I don't know how you can justify that and say that he's keeping the day of dedication. Every other instance of the feast, either the disciples went up with him, or they went up first and he showed up later in the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot one other time. But the disciples were always at the feast. Let's go to
Last place.
First Kings, and we'll
chapter
close
12.
up with that.
Yeah.
And
Chapter 12.
this is about Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and his feast, like unto the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay. First Kings.
1 Kings chapter 12, verse 22.
This is a warning. You know, this should set us our ears on attention when we start talking about any 8-day feast, except for the 8-day feast. 12. I'll pass it right up. Thinking and turning pages don't work good together. 12 and verse 22.
But the word of Elohim came unto Shemaiah, the man of Elohim, saying, Speak unto Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and unto all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the remnant of the people, saying.
So he's talking right here about the tribe of Benjamin and the tribe of Judah, which are the southern tribes. Okay, the ones that had been cut off, but they're still the ones of the Messiah's lineage. Okay, so he says, Speak unto Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Yehudah, because remember that there was a covenant between David, there were and Yahuwah, which one of the covenants of promise, that there would always be a king sitting on the throne in Jerusalem. We're going to hear this out as we go. Unto all the house of Yehudah, the remnant of the people. So there was Levi was down there, okay, because they were working in the temple, those Levites that work in the temple of the order of Aaron. Okay, go ahead.
24. Thus saith Yahuwah, You shall not go up, nor fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Return every man to his house, for this thing is from me.
So he's telling them not to go up and fight against Jeroboam, okay? Because the thing that's going on, the tearing apart of the tribes is of him. The northern tribes had desecrated his covenant so bad that he'd already cut them off. This time period, they were still in covenant with him. And he told them, Rehoboam, not to go up and fight against them because this was of him. Go ahead.
Hey, listen therefore to the word of Elohim, and return to depart according to the word of Elohim. Then Jeroboam built Shechem, built Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from there and built Penuel.
Okay, now what's going on is, remember, and we didn't read all that because again we don't really have time, is that Jeroboam was promised if he would keep the Torah, he would unite all the tribes under him, including the southern tribes under him, if he would just keep his Torah. But let's see what Jeroboam actually does. And he told Rehoboam not to fight against it. But he left Rehoboam on the throne in Jerusalem Because he cannot go back on his covenant he made with David. Go ahead. 25.
25. Mm-hmm. 25. Mm-hmm. That Jeroboam built, I think.
You read that.
26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David.
So he didn't believe Yahuwah at all, did he? When Yahuwah came to him and told him that he would restore Israel, the entire tribe under him, if he would just keep his covenant. He's doubting right here. Go ahead, brother.
If this people go up to do sacrifice to the house of Elohim at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord.
Their master, yep.
Yeah. Even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah.
So if you read back here a little further where Yahuwah told Jeroboam, he didn't believe him, did he? Mm-hmm. He thought the people would turn again to Rehoboam, son of Solomon. Go ahead.
28. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt.
So now it's obvious that they made these 2 golden calves, and that's the same thing Aaron did, you know, when Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah and the commandments from the Most High. When he went up there to do that, he built these 2 golden calves, and that was an abomination, and this is an abomination here. But they built those 2 golden calves for a reason. It's so they wouldn't have to go up to Judah, to the Jerusalem, to the temple to keep the feast. Go ahead.
29. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan.
Doesn't sound like a whole bit different what Antiochus Epiphanes did, what we read in go ahead.
And this thing became a sin for the people, went to worship before the one, even unto Dan.
They went to worship there instead of going up to the temple as they were commanded 3 times a year. Go ahead.
And he made an house of high places and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi.
Why? Because sons of Levi were having service in the temple.
Okay. 32. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel sacrifice unto the calves that he had made, and he placed in Bethel the priest of the high places which he had made.
Now think about what they did back with forward now in Maccabees. That's exactly what the pagans did. Antiochus Epiphanes had them to offer things not just around town, but this is showing you they built altars in different places, same thing, and they offered sacrifices, and they didn't go do what they were commanded to do. It's no different. Notice this is an 8-day feast in the 8th month. Yeah. There's no 8-day feast commanded by Yahuwah, except for the Feast of Tabernacles. Go ahead.
33. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised of his own heart.
Now we get the rest of the story.
And ordained a feast unto the sons of Israel, and he offered upon the altar and burnt incense.
Now, can we make any distinction between when Judas Maccabeus and his brothers ordained that feast? Where'd they get that from? Their own heart. Same thing like Jeroboam when he did this. They did that of their own heart. And it was an 8-day feast like unto the Feast of Tabernacles. See, Yahuwah has plainly commanded not to worship him like the nations worship their mighty ones. And there's a story to be taken from that. We shouldn't be doing anything that's not commanded. We shouldn't be doing Christmas. We shouldn't be doing Easter. We shouldn't be doing Valentine's Day. We shouldn't be doing Halloween and many other such things. Okay? Because again, we're adding to, if we tie our God to those for sure. Okay? And when we tie our Messiah to the Christmas, or we tie him to the to Hanukkah or Easter, we've now tied that, and we end up worshiping him, our Elohim, our mighty ones, like the nations worship theirs. Hopefully, somebody got something out of this teaching today. And again, if you don't believe all this and you think, I'm not going after you. You'll never see me make a negative comment on that at all. This is what we got to say about it. We're going to leave it right there. And we still love you if you keep Hanukkah. If you keep Christmas, I still love you. Keep any of those things. I'm not picking on you. That's why I don't do those things, is because what we've read in the book here today. If anybody is interested in keeping the days of unleavened bread with us in Lena, okay, please RSVP us, because we'll need to know that. The sooner the better, because it's going to determine what size room that we rent. And we have available large rooms, but we don't want to pay for a large room if we don't have a large gathering, okay? So again, and also let us know if you'd like to be on the planning groups. So again, may Yahuwah bless until we meet again.